Thank you, Mr. President. You know, this isn't the first Article 5 convention call we've had. And let me just remind you all, because miraculously it's our first one this session, perhaps somewhat mercifully, it's our first one this session. But an Article 5 convention, for those that haven't had the pleasure of sitting through it in judiciary, is as Justice Scalia framed it, a nuclear bomb to our Constitution. And the major reason is that there's never been one. There's never been an Article 5 convention called in the history of the United States. And there's a reason for that, because it's fraught with disaster. If we call an Article 5 convention, it's kind of like when the governor puts out a special call. Whatever's on that special call, that's all we can do. If the president and the speaker get together and issue a call for a special session, the agenda is wide open. Same thing here. If Congress would set out a constitutional amendment in the United States, we're limited to that constitutional amendment. An Article 5 convention, you cannot limit your representatives, you cannot limit the agenda, and the entire Constitution is laid bare. Laid bare for anybody who happens to be in charge or in the majority. When you walk into that room, wherever it may be, they could change any part of our Constitution. Now I want you to think about that, because for all of its frailties, our democracy is enduring. And the reason it is because that piece of parchment that sometimes we're set to arguing over exactly what it means and exactly what the boundaries of it are. But we always come to an answer that our country can live with. Whether you go back to immediately after the Revolutionary War, when the Supreme Court was in its infancy and making major decisions that are still held to be almost biblical in the laws of our country. When you get to the Civil War, when our country was torn apart by strife and by discourse and by distrust, but yet it held the Union together. And after the war, it helped pave the way to bring the South back into the Union. And when you move into the 20th century, when we had things like internment camps and civil rights strife and all those things that we remember maybe from our childhood but really didn't understand, the Constitution held our country together. I don't know how many of you know this, but the United States is the longest surviving government in world history. Now think about that. You hear about the great Roman Empire, the Greeks, the Ottomans, all those great cultures that have come and gone. In the United States, in a mere 200 plus years, has the most enduring national government in world history. And it's because of that piece of paper. So, you know, I don't take these things lightly. Some of these Article 5 calls are not that far from the 34 required states. And it doesn't matter what the subject matter is of the call. It can be balanced budget. It could be getting rid of the Second Amendment. It could be anything. When you walk into that room, those things are on the table. The First Amendment's on the table. The Second Amendment's on the table. The right to freedom of religion. Imagine that being up for debate and possible change. Imagine states' rights being subject to change. Imagine the right to be protected against unnecessary search and seizure being up for grabs. That's what we're going to risk with a yes vote to House Concurrent Resolution 61. And it amazes me they send these over here. And I don't know what the vote was on this one, but you know, I can't imagine that it wasn't close. I can't imagine that there weren't a lot of people who were objecting to that vote, because it is that dangerous. When Anton Scalia calls it a nuclear bomb, everybody better pay attention. Now, there's differing opinions out there, and for those who are in favor of this, and I don't know if my friend from Morgan's still in favor of this, but, there's differing opinions. There's some people that have written papers that say that, don't worry about it. We can limit it. We tried to pass a couple statutes a few years ago that restricted what our delegates to one of these conventions could do. But the legal scholars of our time, great minds like Justice Scalia, believed that to call a Article 5 convention should be a last resort. Shouldn't be the first resort. It's not a referendum. It's opening up the entire United States Constitution. When that happens, this country that we've all grown up in, and it's treated us so well and made us so blessed to have all the things that we have, and this is the greatest country in the United States. If you have any doubt, if you've never left our borders, please go somewhere. Please go to the best country you think you can find, whether it's France or Britain or wherever you think, and you'll find that compared to the way we live, our poorest live better than 90% of the rest of the world. And those great countries that have such long and flowery histories of great achievements and great moments, they never will rise to what we are. Because when you go to France, they're all French. When you go to Germany, they're all German. When you come to America, it's all of us. Nobody came from here. But yet everybody's been protected who came here to America from somewhere else when they couldn't speak the language, when they had no money in our pockets, and it's all our ancestors. They were protected and allowed to become Americans. And it's because of that Constitution. It's scary to think that for any reason that we would risk that change. And people are going to get up and say, it's hard. It's hard to get any constitutional changes through. It takes a 2/3 vote and then a 2/3 vote of your state houses and then a 2/3 vote of the people in every state until you get to 2/3 of the states. And that's true. But we've passed a lot of constitutional amendments that have been put forth by Congress, so it's obviously possible. But more importantly, we don't know, look where our country's at now. Who 10 years ago would have believed our country would be in such disarray today? And I'm not fearful. Nothing's going to happen to the country. It's not going to collapse. But it is a tumultuous time. I could almost remember the days back when the Vietnam War was going on. And they were shooting students on campuses. And I was a young kid. Some of you guys weren't even born when you think about it. But it was scary. It was scary because there were people marching in the streets. There were tens of thousands of student protesters at WVU. Kids were getting shot. Parents had lost control. We thought the whole world was collapsing. But yet we endured. And the Constitution endured. And our country endured. And we've always endured. And we're going to endure this time. But in 10 years from now, when they call this convention, who might be in charge? What might the mood be? Who might be able to vote what they want through and get the rest of the country through either fear or propaganda vote with them? What could happen to our Constitution? Who wants to risk that here? I don't think any of us. I do want to say that this particular constitutional attempt to have a Article 5 convention is very misplaced. And all of you know why. This one asks for a constitutional amendment of term limits. Not for us necessarily, but certainly for our Congress. Now, We've sat here and learned how the Constitution's designed because we're in it. We're living it. 90% of these bills we pass 34-0. 10% of them we have vast disagreements on. And that's how it's supposed to work. That's what it's supposed to happen, because through that disagreement, just like in a trial, you have two zealous advocates and the truth will come out. May not always come out in our votes, but it'll come out there in public, no matter who does it and what they do. But this wants to put a limit on the number of times that congressional legislators can serve, just like us. Now think about how many bills you've actually been able to read this session. How many bills we voted on that you read top to bottom? Some of us have. My friend from Morgan's read a lot more of them than I have, but we vote on them. And who do you rely upon to tell you what's in those bills that you don't have time to look at? These folks back here are staff, good people, all of them. The lobbyists, not so good people. They remind me of piranhas when you're walking through the halls and they're nipping at your heels because they want a piece of you. They want a piece of your brain. They want a piece of your vote. And they try to mislead you in order to satisfy the people that are paying them. I don't like them. Individually, they're good people, but I don't like them as a profession. I don't like them as a group. But that's who's going to be governing our country if we put term limits into place. Because every time a new group of congressional legislators sit down in their seats, they're going to be raw as you were the first day you were here, and you're not going to have any idea what's going on. And you're going to turn to them because they're going to be the ones who were here the last 10 years, the last 15 or 20 years. And when that happens, when you have to turn to them, they're going to lead you in the direction they want to lead you. And you know what? You won't hear from the lobbyists because the lobbyists will be talking to them, telling them what they want done. And you know what? We'll listen because by the time you figure out what's going on, you'll have to go. And somebody else will be sitting in that seat. Now think about that. Think about how hard it was. I could barely find a bathroom the first session I was here. But you would only have a few of those to be able to become a seasoned legislator and help pass good laws for our country if this amendment would somehow pass. I will tell you the one flaw in that system, if somehow we would allow this Article 5 convention to take place, is you can't vote out staff. You can't vote out lobbyists. These are the only seats that are subject to vote in our country. And if we give that up, we've given up our democracy. We've given up what it means to be an American. We've given up the parchment that has led us to being the longest lasting world government or government in world history. We will give all that up. And we'll be nothing but figureheads. Whoever gets elected will be nothing but just bodies in the seat who are going to vote the way they're told. And when the people don't like us or don't like what happens, they can vote us out, but you know what? The people who are making the decisions will still be there. The people making the decisions will still be behind the closed doors. The people making the decisions will still be out in the halls nipping at the heels of the staff, the lobbyists, the staff. That will be your government. You vote yes for that, that's what you're voting for. If they get to 34 states, and that's the only thing that passes. They don't attack the First Amendment. They don't attack the Bill of Rights in any way. They just go for term limits. That's what you'll be voting for. You'll be voting to give government the opportunity not to be run by the people, but to run by the well-paid. To be run by the ones who are well-paid themselves and are able to hand out gifts, not to us, to the staff. To the staff that's behind us. They won't be working for us, we'll be working for them. Mr. President, I've been up here a good while because I really think this is a bad idea. I think we really abdicate what we were sworn to do, which was uphold the Constitution of the United States. And I think that Constitution is so precious. When I see it work here, I know what Congress goes through. I don't worry about gridlock when I see what happens here. Because what happens here is the process that has been honed by our founding fathers that had to be geniuses to come up with the checks and balances that have controlled us through 200 plus years of history. And I want you to think about that. Think about how we argue and squabble to the point that the outside people, when they leave, they say, "Don't you hate those Republicans?" I don't. You guys are my friends, every one of you. The guy up there in the front rows, I consider him one of my very good friends, and I have great respect for him. Because you know what? We can fight and argue and not get stuff done, and when we go back there to junior rules, you think we've been living together for years. Because that's the kind of people we are. And when you're new and you first come down here and you're feeling your oats and you think you got to stand up and pound the table, I did. You learn real quick that that's not the answer, that's not how government works. Government works by persuasion. Government works by consensus. It doesn't even work for the majority when we try to shove things through the pipe and out the other end. Because somewhere along the lines, they get stuck. You know why that house down there has 100 people in it and we only have 34? Because the founding fathers knew that if they had to run every 2 years, if there was 100 of them running every 2 years, that house could never fall under the control of one power. Sometimes that's Democrats, sometimes that's Republicans, sometimes that's a dictator. But that's why they did it. So the people could turn their government around on a dime to avoid a catastrophe. And I don't mind them. My friend from Braxton gets upset when I praise them for doing something good, which is usually something you all don't like. But when they do something good, you know, you see government at work. And sometimes they do good on your side. Sometimes they do good on our side when it's in those crucial, those 10% of bills that we fight over. But that's how the system was designed. And we can't allow the system to be tinkered with because of somebody's whim. Because somebody decided that they would try to pass an Article 5 convention referendum and get 34 states to join in. I'd like to go sit in those other legislatures and see how they could come up with the justification for such a bad idea. We do it. It happens. Sounds good. You get it on paper, and you don't realize till we actually pass it what a bad idea it is. It reminds me of the super tax break that we were comparing the reduction in severance tax to in the 80s. I don't even remember that. But you know what? It almost bankrupted our state. And we wouldn't want to take that risk again. We just wouldn't want to take the risk of making another dumb mistake. You make this dumb mistake, there will be no turning around on it. It will be over. It will be a mistake that we can never pull back from. Because once it becomes a part of the Constitution, as difficult as it was to put it in, it would be even more difficult to take it out. And I don't want that. I don't want that for my children, and I don't want it for their children, and I don't want it for any of our children. I want to be able to stand up and tell them about the Constitution. I want to be able to stand up and tell them what I learned in this body over, I guess, at least 8 years that I get to be around here. I want to be able to tell them how it works. I love going down and talking to our pages every morning when I come in because I want them to know how important it is to be here. As much as I hate it sometimes, being away from my family and my kids, it's damn good to be here. You know why? Because we're living history. We are part of history. Every time we come down here, whether the teachers are out there stomping or the miners are up in the balcony, we're part of history. We're part of history because of that parchment that we've all lived under for 200 years. You know, it started with the Magna Carta. The French still claim that they were the founders of democracy. We're the founders of democracy. We're the birthplace of democracy. We're the light on the hill for every other country on this earth. You know why? Because we have Azingers, we have Jeffries, we have Stallings, we have Romanos. We got everybody.
The hour midnight having arrived, the conclusion of the legislative session.